Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 2021 District 3 Community Meeting. Nice to see all of you here. Tonight, as you know, we are hosting Joe Hoefgen. He has been our city manager in the recent years, and so hopefully you have seen him here in this meeting as a guest a variety of times, especially during the past 18 months for COVID. But Joe is retiring on November 14th, and this past Tuesday, Mayor Brand gave him a key to the city. Just so everybody knows, the key does not let him back in the city once he retires. And it definitely doesn't let him back into City Hall. Oh, there it is. It's a very nice key to the city, Joe. So with that said, yeah, we're just going to have a conversation with Joe. We'll kind of do some reflections on, what's transpired during his time here. And then, we'll open it up to questions. What does Joe see maybe coming down the pike for the person who replaces him and the council? And then, of course, we'll just do a round robin of questions that anybody has as well. So with that said, let me introduce Joe. And Joe, why don't you just give everybody a little bit of a background, how it is you came here, some of your history, and then maybe just share some of your, the goals you had when you started and what you were able to accomplish in that position. Some people may not even realize what a city manager does, and maybe explain that dynamic as well. So I'll turn it over to you, Joe.
Sure, I appreciate that. Thank you, Christian, for the opportunity, and hello, everyone. As Christian mentioned, my time is kind of short here. My last day in the office is Friday of next week, and I've been with the city for 10 years, doing different jobs. Initially came in as community services director, working out of the facility up on Artesia. That was an interim position. Didn't really think I was going to be with Redondo Beach long term. My whole working history had been in local government. It's what I went to school for. I got my master's degree in public administration years ago back in the Midwest, and I've lived and worked in several cities across several states, and spent a majority of my career was with the city of Del Mar down in the San Diego area. Spent 15 years there, was 2 years in Encinitas. Before that, came to the LA area in 2007 when I joined the city of PV Estates as their city manager. Was in that job for 4 years. That job ended, came to Redondo Beach. So add it all up, it's 35 years of service, and it's time. People have always told me that you'll know when it's time to go. Well, I figured that out this year. So anyway, so I'm on the way out. Christian asked that I kind of reflect on kind of what I saw, some of my accomplishments, and those of you that know me, I'm not someone to kind of toot my own horn too much. In fact, the last council meeting was awesome. I was there for 15, 20 minutes. Everybody said nice things about me, then I got to log off and go home. So not all of our meetings have been like that. I've been to lots of meetings where they've gone past midnight, 2, 3 in the morning sometimes. So I added it up. I think it's over 1,000 council meetings I've been to in my life. So I'm, going to do something else on Tuesday evenings. But first and foremost, I'm proud of the team that has been put together here, that will remain after I'm gone. A lot of you probably know that while the city has 400 and some full-time employees and hundreds of part-time employees, the council really has one employee that they appoint and they direct, and that's the city manager. And then the city manager, in turn, is the appointing authority. This is what's in the charter for all the department heads. So police chief, fire chief, public works director, human resources director, pretty much everyone that's on the team right now are people that I have appointed. And it's a high functioning team. They're kind of good with people. They're subject matter experts in their fields. And, while the city has one city manager, there's really a team of managers that oversee the work of the city, kind of the day-to-day operations of the city. And, in a lot of ways, hiring a department head, when you hire a department head, the way I look at it, it tends to either make your life a lot better or make it a lot worse. So if you get a great police chief, if things are going to go really, really well in the police department, if you get someone that's the other extreme, you're going to have problems. It's usually not just neutral. It's a little bit like getting married. When you get married, your life a lot of times will either get a lot better or it will get worse. It won't stay the same. So I'm happy that with all of the appointments, my life has gotten better, and they've done a great job with the city. The other thing that I feel good about is the relationships that we as a city have with our 6 unions. You may not be aware that we've got a number of employee unions in the city. And at the time that I was appointed, there was a lot of unrest with the unions. They weren't happy. We didn't have contracts. And, over time, we've been able to improve relations with the employee unions. We've been able to put in place agreements that are acceptable both to the employee groups as well as to the city. In fact, even during the time of the pandemic, when we were having financial problems, we were able to work with the employees to secure agreements. So now with all of our employee groups, we've got agreements in place, multi-year agreements, and things are really good from an employee relations standpoint. And, they have worked with us during some difficult budget years. They haven't been easy budget years during my time here. And in fact, during the time of COVID, COVID hit Redondo Beach pretty hard in terms of the travel industry, ground to a halt, the restaurant business, how badly it was affected, and retail. And so we've been able to kind of weather the financial storm resulting from COVID. And I think also during the time of the pandemic, feel really good about the city's response. We were one of the first cities in the area to declare a local state of emergency. We did things that some other cities didn't do. We had a disaster council that met periodically to kind of help guide policy. We were proactive in terms of the closure of our facilities, and I don't think a city has done a better job in terms of the outdoor dining, in terms of the transition that was needed as a result of the pandemic. So feel good about that. Our budget management, as I've talked about, that's one of the key responsibilities of the city manager, is to prepare a draft budget each year. In the charter, by May 16th of each year, a draft budget has to be presented for the next fiscal year that begins July 1st. And of course, there's hearings and lots of opportunity for public input. And many times the budget, does go through changes as a result of the public hearings and the council direction. But we have avoided situations where we've had structurally imbalanced budgets for long periods of time. I mean, we've had kind of peaks and valleys in terms of our finances, but very, very proud of our financial management of the city, the clean audits that we've received. Economic development is something that we also have put some effort into, and, those efforts take multiple years. There's things that were started by my predecessor that I was able to finish and be here when the hotels opened, when the Shade Hotel opened, the Marine Avenue hotels opened, sort of got those across the finish line. There's the Legato project that, my successor will see to the finish line. So, Redondo has, a lot of potential. I think definitely our finances will be on the way up as the city emerges out of the COVID restrictions. And last thing I'll say that I, feel very good about is, the work that we've done kind of with citizen groups, with the staff support provided to commissions, with the working groups that I have had the pleasure to appoint and work with, our homeless task force, the cannabis steering committee that is the most recent one that that our staff worked with, the Artesia Aviation Advisory Committee that made a number of recommendations. So anyway, so those are some of the things I feel good about. Those are foundation for my successor to build on. I mean, we're not done with COVID yet. I mean, there's still restrictions that we have in place. We're going to have to cross this, cross this threshold of, are the employees going to be required to be vaccinated? We do not have that in place right now, except for EMTs. They're the only employees that are required to be vaccinated. And like any other employer, we've got most of our employees vaccinated. We've got some that aren't. And we have actually hired some people from other organizations that have taken a stricter line in terms of the vaccine requirements. So that's going to be something that my successor will have to deal with. And, heaven forbid, if there's a new strain of COVID that takes root and we have to go backwards in terms of the restrictions, I hope that doesn't happen. I don't think that will happen, but that's something definitely on the horizon. The recommendations from the Cannabis Steering Committee and the follow-up on the development of an ordinance for the city to put in place some regulations related to cannabis retail operations and delivery. That's something that will be coming back to council. There's also an initiative. I think that you've talked about this in the past, that the council, not the council, but the community will have to sort through and evaluate whether or not that qualifies for the ballot. So lots of things, and including continuing budget challenges. There's always more need than there are resources. So the budget is really a matter of setting priorities and getting back and doing strategic planning that we've gotten away from kind of during the time of the pandemic. So, the thing about being a city manager, you're never bored. There's always lots of things to do, and you get frustrated sometimes and you're pulled in lots of different directions, but I don't think I've ever been bored working in local government. I remember, my very first job, I'll tell one story, and that was my very first job out of college. I was in the Dallas area, had been hired with the city of University Park, Texas, where SMU's at. And they had one meeting a month, and I remember the council would meet this. They didn't have the equivalent of the Brown Act there, so I'm sure they have something that requires open meetings now. But at that time, 30-some years ago, the council would meet behind closed doors. The whole meeting would be pre-planned. You're going to make a motion on this. You're going to second the motion. Any questions of staff? So everything was worked out in advance behind closed doors. If there was any member of the public in the audience when they came out, it was, oh my God, why do we have people here? What do they want? So they would send me out as the new guy, go talk to this person, and if it was Ron, go find out what Ron's doing here. What does Ron want? Why is he here? And, the meeting would last about half an hour. Everything that was decided behind closed doors would happen in open session. 30 minutes later, it's over. And I remember sitting there saying, this is so boring. This is not what I got into local government for. I want to have more excitement. I want to have more public participation. I want to have more interesting meetings. And I definitely solved that problem with some of the cities that I've gone to work for. That's one of the things I'll miss is the interaction with the public, with the residents. I kind of subscribe to the Athenian code of ethics that you try to leave the city in better condition after you've left than the condition it was in before you arrived. So I hope that I've helped the city of Redondo Beach in some ways. I feel good about the staff that's left behind. And, at this point, maybe I'll turn it back to Christian and whatever questions any of you have, I'll be happy to happy to try to respond.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I appreciate that, Joe. I will say this, that when Joe came on, he alluded to the fact that things were tense in the city, and I recall that time, even though I wasn't on the council yet, there was picket lines by employees outside of the state of the city. It was something to behold, and I think this was mentioned by the mayor and a couple other people the other night. Joe has a very affable, calming demeanor, and he really came in and he put together a team. He selected an assistant city manager to work with him, who has other strengths and qualities, that are different from Joe's, and so I think the combination of the two of them created a great management experience, and that really is evident, as he pointed out, in the many different department heads that have been hired over this time, even since I've been here. And you've met many of them here in these meetings. And they really do make a very dramatic impact on the day-to-day services that the city provides. Joe, you touched on some challenges, but thinking ahead, you've got this career. You've worked in a variety of coastal cities here in California. What aside from the few things that you mentioned, what do you see as challenges that your successor and the city might face in coming years, and what are maybe some opportunities that you see a city like Redondo Beach having in the coming years?
Sure. One of the things that's a continuing challenge, not just for Redondo Beach, but for local government in general, is the sort of continuing efforts by the state to try to impose kind of one-size-fits-all solutions to, serious problems. But, in the process, there's an effort to erode local control. And I'm sure you've talked in these meetings before about the overreach by the state to try and impose housing solutions that kind of take away our ability to decide what type of density we have and what types of development is put in place. So, that's another continuing challenge that cities will have is, again, continuing to engage with the state and respond and monitor legislative activities at the state, more so the state than the federal level. And, this city does have a state lobbyist, has a federal lobbyist. They're of tremendous help to keep us advised and informed about what's going on. But that's a challenge and an opportunity, I suppose, to, address those issues. Budget, I've already touched on. I think that Redondo has, there's a lot of potential, but also keep in mind that we still have the system in place that, sales tax is distributed based on where the point of sale takes place. And, there are opportunities for us as those purchases happen through online sales for us to get a share of those sales. But there's still kind of a push and pull between cities of, hotels are very valuable to have located in your cities. Retail establishments are very valuable in terms of the sales tax. And in the case of hotels, the hotel tax is generated. So that's, a continuing economic development challenge and opportunity to, number one, retain the tax base that we have. And at the same time, if you can grow that or build on it, if there's a quality development that's looking at a variety of cities, if we've got the right location, bring them to Redondo Beach. There's the continuing issues related to the AES site and what its long-term future holds. That's not a property that the city owns or has direct control over. There are restrictions in place based on what the voters have approved, but we know that there's interest on the part of the community that are different from what the property owner would like to do with that property. So that's a continuing challenge, what the long-term operation of that or presence on that site will be, as well as the waterfront. The waterfront continues to there's lots of opportunity for improvement at the waterfront. City has taken a different approach now with the public amenities plan, so that process is getting underway. There's a consulting firm that's been retained that will basically engage in a process to cite and identify and scope different public facilities at the waterfront. So again, these are kind of long-term, not solved in 1 year situations, but a process that over time will be will be dealt with. So those are some of the things that I think come to mind, Christian.
Oh, great. I appreciate that. Well, let's see. I've got a question here. Somebody just wanted to have you clarify, Joe. Did you say that the city hired from other cities unvaccinated people, or were you just saying that we hired people from cities that had different policies than ours?
Yeah, for different policies, and also we're in a sort of competition with other cities in terms of retaining talent, and we want sort of the best and brightest that we can get. And there's a whole generation of people that are moving on. People are making different lifestyle choices based on the experience of the past 18 months. I'm sure you've all kind of read about that, maybe dealt with that yourself, where this whole idea of working from home versus working in the office. I mean, it's not because of the pandemic that I'm leaving. It's just the right time for me to leave. But as we try to keep our staffing levels at at appropriate levels, we're in competition with other cities and with other employers for quality candidates. And our public works director, he was in Torrance before. We were able to attract and retain him in Redondo Beach, and so there's a little bit of a kind of a push and pull between cities in terms of retaining talent.
Yeah. Ron, you got a question?
I have a couple of comments. First, I did want to thank you for Cameron Harding. He's an absolute delight to work with, and I know you started with community service, so he seems to be fitting in really well, and his team that he's putting together is actually really well. I'm on one of the commissions, and I'm hoping that you will consent to have an oral history done of you before you take off long term, so that we have that as part of our historical context. So I'm hoping that you're open to me reaching out to you offline to set up something on Zoom or in person to just get your oral history.
Well, sure. If you think there's anyone interested in my personal history, I live in Long Beach, so I'm not too far away.
Okay.
Everything, I could be on the other side of the world and we could do this, right?
So, there you go. But we do it on Zoom, so it doesn't really matter where you are.
Right. Thank you. No, thank you, Ron. And we've talked before at the commission receptions, and thank you for the nice comments about Cameron. And he's one of the most recent hires.
He is, and I think our most recent hire is Jennifer Paul, our new finance director, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So, does anybody else have a question for Joe?
I don't have a question, but I'd just like to thank him for his service over the last decade.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you. And I see the comment from Mr. Averick as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, Joe, I will say this. The first time I met you, I was sitting in the audience of the council chambers. I think it was for something, I can't remember what it was exactly for, but it was right before you had just come on, and so you were the new community services director, and I was serving on the Recreation and Parks Commission, and I had no idea who you were until then I went to the next meeting, and but I do remember you just turning around and saying hello. And not a lot of people do that, they don't take a moment out just to say hi or to welcome you, even if, especially sitting in the chambers as such. But but it has been, from my perspective, a real honor to work alongside you and to learn from you. When I was running for council, I went around and met with as many people as I could to ask questions, and you graciously, had me in your office and, took on probably an enormous amount of questions, from somebody who was just completely green about process and whatnot, and so I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that you have been accessible, throughout the past 6 years. You have helped me to focus on issues I want to focus on. You've helped me to facilitate getting meetings together, getting staff engaged, and of course, one of our biggest jobs sometimes as council members is to represent people and to be a voice for them when they feel like they're getting nowhere. And anytime that has happened, or I have had to come to you, you have always facilitated a way to ensure that we try to get a solution resolved to the best of our abilities if we can. And I think that's from my perspective, that's just been a wonderful asset to me as somebody to have a city manager who is responsive, and so you will be dearly missed. I see Jonathan has his hand up. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Amy, echo a lot of those comments that have been said a little bit earlier on that, but I think more for me, I think it's really an amazing thing to see someone in your position where you even said that you're not necessarily, but I don't think anyone twice words the care and the sincerity that you put into the city. And I just really want to say thank you for that, for making it feel like a place where we know someone's taking care of us in our home. And, just it's going to be something to see how things change a little bit here right now without having you necessarily at the helm of it. But at the same time, I think you've put us on a very good path that I'm confident that things are going to work well for it. And I just really want to sincerely say thank you for all of that.
And
thank you, Jonathan. You've been great to work with. Ever since I got to know you as part of our cannabis working group, and even before that, it's a wonderful resource to the city and very knowledgeable and helpful. I've learned a lot from you, Christian in particular. I think all the attendees know that I'm part of the paid staff. Christian is has what's supposed to be a part-time elected position, but I have tremendous respect for Christian and others that put themselves out there and take seriously the job of being a mayor or council member. It is sometimes a thankless job. You're pulled in a lot of different directions, and Christian is motivated. My experience has always been motivated by doing what is in the best interest of the city, best interest of the residents, and Christian's very thoughtful, very analytical, wonderful qualities in a council member and wonderful qualities in a person. So I also see a comment from Anita Havrick. I appreciate I enjoyed working with you and working with the school district as well. So you're another one that's a real giver in the community and have done a lot to make Redondo Beach a better place.
That is true. It's nice. Thanks for being here, Anita. All right. Well, with that said, Joe, I won't keep you. I want to thank you again for your service. Clearly, I'll see you, before you leave. But I hope that you and your wife enjoy whatever it is retirement brings you. Nothing but happiness. And even though I joke that the key doesn't allow you back in the city, I of course hope to see you here in the future, at the very least when I retire from my service as council.
You'll see me at the restaurants, and you won't see me at the meetings. My cell phone isn't going to change, but I'm not the city manager. I'm one of the gone guys, so to speak, after next Friday. But if I can be of help, certainly don't hesitate to call. But thank you all. Appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here, Joe.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night. All right, so the rest of the meeting here is really just open forum for any questions or concerns anybody has or things you want to talk about. So, Ron, you got your hand up? Go ahead.
So I wanted to thank you. Yesterday we had the pleasant surprise of actually seeing them fix our street from top to bottom. Got new pavement in there. Hopefully the leaks won't go around. So I thank you for all the efforts you put in to at least make sure that happens. So thank you again.
No, absolutely. I think Jim on the call has a different perspective. He was not happy to be woken up by the jackhammers at 7 a.m. Yeah. But I'm going to follow up with staff on that. You know, I'm curious to find out if they used some more porous type asphalt or something to fill in the picture you sent me, to see if that'll help with some of the ponding issues.
They ultimately did is they actually fixed some other potholes on the street too. Not only ours, but
okay.
Today they fixed some of the others.
Great. And, you know, I mean, that's a good segue into reminding people that, you know, if you see a pothole or, you know, some deficiency in a street that really needs to be addressed, you know, you can always, of course, email me. But if you have a smartphone, you can use the Access Redondo app, and you can literally take a picture of it through the app. You select streets and sidewalks, you take a picture of it, it will geolocate it, which is, you know, just an amazing thing. And staff will address. And we did invest last year in a new heat stamp truck, so you know the crews can go around and literally, you know, cut out and fix patches. Not just, you know, that they will literally cut out and fix, you know, segments of the street where necessary. So as we go into the winter months here, you know, that's when we tend to see a lot of street damage happen. Maybe not as much as areas that get snow, but as the rains happen and whatnot, things become loose and kick up. And so, like I said, don't ever hesitate to email myself or use the Access Redondo app, so that way we can address it in a timely manner. Any other questions, concerns, comments? If not, you're all going to make my wife happy that this will be the shortest meeting ever, but we do have plenty of time. Lee, I saw you come. Oh no, I saw you.
I was just I was just going to say, you know, this will make up for your 8 and 10 hour council meetings.
Yeah. Well, you know, council meetings tend to go longer than one may hope, but that's all right. It's part of the gig. Ron, to answer your question, I was looking this past week for Peter's email, and I don't seem to have it. So I'm trying to see if I can find his cell phone number for you. So I apologize for the delay on that. I will just. Ron, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
So I had a Brown Act question. I noticed when the council does their ex-party communications, you hear some of them say, well, I talked to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so about an issue, and it would seem that the 3 people or 4 people they talked to would be a violation of the Brown Act, and I don't know why the city attorney doesn't say, you know, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that kind of stuff.
Well, so you are allowed to talk to myself as a council member. I can talk to one other council member on a topic, right? And the mayor. Okay, so technically there's 2 individuals on the dais that I could talk to. If for some reason I talk to a third, then that would put me in conflict with the Brown Act. But what you'll hear in ex parte is, usually I'll say I've talked with staff, I've talked with residents. Maybe if it's a hearing, maybe the applicant or the appellant, and then I will usually say who I've talked to on the dais. Talking to those other individuals, whether it be residents in the plural or whatnot, that's not a violation of the Brown Act. Where it could get tricky and be a violation of the Brown Act was if I talked to a resident and then that resident went and talked and shared what I may have said to them with a council member who I am not Brown Acted with, and then you get a serial conversation. Not cereal like you eat, but serial, SERIAL. So that is the only time I think where there could be a potential Brown Act violation, but that typically doesn't happen, and at least I haven't seen anything to that extent happen in my time here on the council. Everybody seems to be pretty judicious and understand what they need to do and how they should or should not handle themselves in terms of talking with people. And by the way, we only do ex parte when it's a public hearing, right? So we don't do ex parte for discussion items or whatnot. But the same rules technically apply. We don't ever want to have serial conversations with other members or as a de facto through residence to other members. So, Lee.
Yeah, I did occur to me a question. This is sort of in regards to the extension of the power plant. I got an email yesterday from Thomas Siebels. I think you got the same email, in fact. Request for comments on tentative TSO for AES Redondo Beach LLC Redondo Beach Generating Station.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like because of the extension that they need to get another permit basically to allow them to not meet the water quality standards.
Yeah, I gave that document a quick glance over, and my assumption there too was the same thing, that they need to extend their permits for operating as an OTC plant once through cooling, and that they'll be going through the motions to do that. And so, but I mean, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that they will be granted those permits now that they've been extended. The ability to operate by the State Water Board, and those hearings are going to be, I think, for the Regional Water Quality Board. So that would be my guess.
Yeah, the other comment I was going to make on it, this email, it looks like it was sent, I'm guessing, to everybody who had made a comment on the power plant in the last couple of years.
Oh, okay.
It's got 178 recipients on it, all in plain text, which I actually think is inappropriate for a public communication like this.
I would agree, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't even look at who they had sent it to. I assumed it was just coming to the council members because we tend to get documents like that. But yes, I'm a big fan of the blind copy, and I don't know why they didn't do that. But
I'm sort of surprised there hasn't been a cascade on this with people doing reply all, but even then it's not, because this has got a bunch of personal email addresses in there along with names.
Yeah, and as I look through it right now as we're talking, you're right. A lot of the names I'm recognizing are individuals who spoke or sent in some type of public comment in the past year as we went through the hearings. So yeah, what I would recommend though is just emailing Mr. Siebels back and just letting him know that he should be blind copying everybody on that.
All right.
And I will do the same as well.
Okay.
So yeah, just to make sure that everybody is aware, what Lee is referring to, the other day we on Tuesday there was a hearing in front of the State Water Board as it relates to the operations of AES. We've talked about this God knows how many times over the many years here. AES was supposed to close down. Their last day of operations was supposed to be December 31st, 2020, and then that didn't happen. They were granted a 1-year extension last year by the State Water Board, and this was a result of a variety of agencies, CalISO, the Independent Grid Operator, the California Public Utilities Commission, basically saying that they were concerned about there not being enough available power. And that, with that lack of power and last year they were talking about 3 years, that we would have the potential for further brownouts or blackouts or whatnot. And of course, a lot of this too is happening. A lot of these brownouts, blackouts, shutdowns, or whatnot are happening as a result of the many fires that we've been experiencing over the past few years as well, which, by the way, is in many cases a direct result of PSE&G and sometimes Southern California Edison not having really maintained their underlying infrastructure, especially in high fire areas. And so while fires can start due to natural issues like lightning strikes, we have had issues, especially in the northern part of the state, where power lines have gone down and started a fire. And so it creates issues for the entire state. So last year we did go through this process as a board member for Clean Power Alliance. I was alerted pretty early. Well, I wouldn't say too early, but much earlier than we would have been by AES to the fact that, hey, they were looking to extend, and I brought that to the city council in short order, and we right away started a process of trying to fight back and see what we could do to stem AES staying open beyond when they should. We were mildly successful last year. We were able to get them to only continue operations for 1 year. And that was a small win, but I think each of us had a lingering feeling that was not the end of the conversation, and that is basically what happened. Earlier this year, in the spring, they came back again, and what they did last year was they extended 3 other once-through cooling power plants for an additional 3 years, and they gave Redondo a 1-year extension. And Redondo, by the way, which, if you were to go watch this state water board meeting or previous ones where I've spoke, you will hear many of us say that Redondo is not only is it one of the oldest plants, but it is the least efficient plant. You've all seen it takes, I think, like a 24-hour period for it to come online. So it's not like the AES plant, if it is needed to meet power demands, it doesn't just turn on and start operating. Like, it really requires an enormous amount of time and energy to do so. And then there was a handful of times in the past year where we had some power issues where parts of the plant were not even operational. They couldn't actually do what they were being paid to do. So this spring, when the CPUC and CalISO came back with their information and they said, well, now we need the plant for an additional 2 years, the city continued its fight. And that's what culminated this past Tuesday. They, as I said in my comments, I felt like it was a waste of my time to be speaking. It felt like it was a foregone conclusion right from the get-go. And if you listen to some of the comments from the chair of the board, very apologetic, but also trying to thread that fine line of why they have to do certain things that people don't like. And so despite hearing from 4 members of the city council and the mayor and citizens and residents and 2 members of the city council from Hermosa Beach, Assemblymember Marisucci, they unanimously decided to extend the power plant for another 2 years. So I apologize to the residents for that. Beyond the 2 years, one of the things that I think also was a little bit frustrating was to read the language in the proposal that leaves it open for another possible extension beyond that, and one of the water board members did make a mention that, they would really like to not see this come back before them again. I think the AES plan has run its course. I think most residents would probably agree with that and would like to see something purposeful happen down there. What that is, we don't know. That will be determined by the property owner in collaboration with the city, hopefully, and or with the residents who ultimately would have to vote for any land use changes down there. But that's where we're at right now. And since we've talked about the power line corridor here in this meeting many times before as well, and you all know that I would like to see that happen, I'll just do a quick refresher on that. We, a couple of years ago, we did a method of service study with Southern California Edison, and it came back that we can take down those power lines. Both lines, there's 220 kV and 66 kV. The 220 is what carries power out of the plant, and the 66 kV goes down to a switch yard in there, helps power up the plant, if you will. Those lines can come down. That was what the study told us. They can come down at the very least to the Redondo border, which is just at the edge of Dominguez Park. I believe they can probably come down through Torrance and out to one of the substations in Torrance. But Torrance, as a city, would need to do a method of service study and come to that conclusion. So, the long goal now is that they will come down and that the city will work with Edison to make that happen. But we do need the property owner to be a part of that. If the property owner decides he doesn't want those lines to come down, or he doesn't want to be a partner in that process, he actually can determine whether they stay up or not. So hopefully he and the city and everybody can maybe get on good terms in the next 2 years while it's operational, to see if we can actually effectuate, when I am out of office, some way for that plant to be removed and those power lines to be removed, and really change the landscape of of not only our city and our district, but have a great green belt and park area that stretches from Dominguez Park all the way down to the waterfront. I think that would change the dynamic of the entire South Bay. Some other updates, recent updates. As you know, we did the cannabis meeting last month, and if you haven't watched it, I recommend go watch it. Jonathan, who's on the meeting tonight, was a great presenter, and I think he gave a well-rounded presentation on how we got to where we are and why we're even having these conversations and discussions. I will say that the other night, right after dinner, somebody knocked on our door, and it was a signature gatherer for the ballot initiative that we have talked about. This ballot initiative is written by cannabis retailers, special interests. One of them has already bought a property in Riviera Village, and they're using it for some other use. And what I will say is, when I just listening, my wife was at the door. The signature gatherer was not telling the truth. They were saying that by signing this, it would bring more money to police and public safety and fire and blah, blah, blah. And that there is absolutely nothing in their ballot initiative that does that. So I just want to make sure that anybody that's on the call tonight or is watching later understands that the people who are being paid to go out and knock on your door and get signatures are not telling the truth, and that's unfortunate. So please, if you haven't, watched the video from the meeting, take the survey that I have out right now, because I think that's always helpful and important for the council, and just say no if they come to your door. Another conversation we had the other night was related to, and Joe mentioned it in his comments, was the outdoor dining decks, or parklets, as we've been calling them, in the Riviera Village, and you see them around in maybe some other places. It was a way we did a dining deck trial 4 or 5 years ago, and we had decided to remove that. Only one restaurateur had taken advantage of it at that time. That pilot project ended, but when COVID hit last summer, right around the 4th of July, everybody was hurting, especially our restaurants throughout town. And so the Riviera Village bid, and Alan Sanford, who does Beach Life. They really work together with our staff to figure out a way to get them up and operational so that people could sit outside. And it's been, as was reported in our meeting the other night, it was not only good for them during that time, but it's actually been good overall for all the restaurants down there and all the businesses. Our assistant city manager reported out that they did look into sales tax revenues, and they actually were up from historic sales tax generation in that area. So it was up dramatically, clearly, from last year and during COVID, where most people were clearly staying home and just doing their grocery shopping and not eating out. But they also compared it to historical data, and it was up even over that. So I think, not only does the council support the idea of continuing this, but I think many residents would like to see it too. Alfresco dining is something that everybody enjoys, and not just in the Riviera Village, but I think anywhere in the city. It's a charming way to spend your time eating outdoors. So we are now. Because the Riviera Village specifically is in our coastal zone, we have to work with the Coastal Commission and jump through hoops to try to ensure that we are in compliance with their access mandates. And then we have to figure out how do we make this work on in the long term. The current parklets were not designed for long term. We will need to, as staff mentioned the other night, we need to consider the infrastructure, how they're built. When we did the pilot a few years ago, the ones that were built, I think the costs were somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 to build them out, and they were strong like bull. They were built to withstand potential cars slamming into them, and we also need to consider stormwater runoff and whatnot. So there are an enormous amount of considerations that the council and staff will be taking on as we explore this process. And as I said in my comments the other night, I want to make sure too that while we are doing this, for the Riviera Village, that we are also really considering the other areas in the city or restaurants that right now have dining in their parking lots or on the sidewalk, or when Artesia eventually gets the injection of love that we've been slowly stepping towards over the past 6 years, and we revitalize that corridor, that we also consider extending the sidewalks or creating some type of parklet situation there as well, because I think the people in North Redondo would like to have a similar experience, with the retailers and restaurants in their neighborhood as well. Before I keep talking, let me see questions here. Okay, yes, you're more than welcome. Any other questions from the audience before I try to think of any other stuff that's come up recently? Kelly. Potter's very thirsty plant. Illegal growers steal water for their plants in Yucca Valley. Are we concerned about more gang activity? At this time, no. I think gang activity is something that the city is always sensitive to, especially because when City Attorney Webb was a prosecutor, there was some serious gang activity back in those years. We haven't had any major activity. I think once in a while, you may have somebody come into town or do something, but I think we are safe from that, and I don't. We can always have a further conversation with PD and their perspective, but and maybe Jonathan wants to weigh in. But the point, what the city is trying to do is find a reasonable way to handle any potential retail sales so that we can actually ensure public safety, public health, and preserve zoning guidelines for our city as well. Jonathan, do you want to, and I say you're driving, so, but do you want to address the idea keeping citizens safe from possible gang activity with pot sales, and what maybe you are seeing in other jurisdictions that have retail locations, and what they have done or haven't done, or any types of activity they've seen as a result?
I think the bigger things to kind of notice, at least here, what's happened more locally in Redondo Beach, is that we do have illicit operations. The biggest problem with the illicit operations is it's less so the concerns of, let's say, any kind of violent activities, though it certainly can be on there. Because keep in mind, if something were to happen in there, let's say a robbery or something to that effect, the illicit operators are not likely to call on the cops to help them. While a legal operator will certainly want to call onto the police to help them on for that, because it's part of the whole benefit of being a legal operator. The more dangerous thing to really keep in mind is that illegal operators end up selling unsafe, untested products. And so we don't have products that go through safety testing regulations, from pesticides to heavy metals to whatever else. But we don't have the benefit of having safe access to product within the city. The other part that I just wanted to briefly speak into was the cultivation part. It's been in the news a lot here. The Cannabis Advisory Committee has not recommended we go after a cultivation yet. Not necessarily just because of the water resources, which are certainly valid to bring up, but also we see that there's a glut and an oversupply in actual production of product in the state, and where the real problem is that there's a lack of actual retail sales to allow for these products to kind of go through. So, I wouldn't worry so much on the cultivation end, but the other part I wanted to speak to real briefly that I think is of interest here, we currently have an unfunded enforcement liability within the city. So we have these operators that come in, they're illegal on that end, it taps our resources. We have brought in the state at certain times to help us out with the enforcement on that, but it is an ongoing effort that we do need to address better than we have. And one of the ways that we can do that is through legalization. The 20% of the state's tax revenues go to giving grants for local law enforcement. And the way we can tap into that is that we have to meet the criteria of allowing for personal outdoor cultivation as well as retail. And if we can meet that kind of a formula, that's something what ultimately the council decides to do, we can tap into those resources and help with those enforcement efforts. So I just want to make sure that's something that's kind of put out there, but thank you very much for that question.
Yeah, thanks. And the PD was a part of the cannabis steering committee, and so some of the recommendations were that any potential retailers would have to work with PD related to security and safety measures as well. So I'm not interested in doing anything that's going to make our city less safe or invite in gang activity, and I don't think anybody on that steering committee, including the PD, is interested in that as well. But thanks for the comment and the question, Kelly, and duly noted. I hear what you're saying. Other questions, comments? All right. Well, seeing none, I don't have anybody lined up for next month's meeting. It is November, and I know we have Thanksgiving, so I'll have to look at the calendar. I don't remember which date the meeting will be on yet, but clearly I will keep it away from the holiday. Council does not meet again until November 2nd, and there's, I guess that we will wrap up the meeting a little bit early tonight. So thank you everyone for showing up. As always, my phone, my email, you know where to get me when you have a question. And with that said, thank you everyone for being here. We will see you in November. Take care.
Thanks, Christian.
You're more than welcome.